Um, but I think we're gonna delve in then and see what happens and where we go with Marley. So we're going to find out a bit about Marley's working practices, whether you need a studio or where you make things happen. And um, I noticed that Peppy is here also from Beacon Family Services, which is great.
And
Welcome.
Charlotte is here as well.
And it's yeah, it's nice. And so we can. Marley's been working for about just over a year, I think, now on the project as an incidental artist and as Wheatley Fellow also. And right from the start, there was a sort of fascinating proposal to work with and alongside Beacon Family Services in Sutton Coldfield. And we can learn about them as an organization a little bit, I think, just through the chat that we're going to talk through now. And interestingly, about that relationship of how I think artwork emerges from context and relationships with people over time, which
Mm.
is sort of one of the hardest things to tease out and find out about, and somehow is like the anti to what studio often sounds like. Studio might be about hiding away and making things, and somehow you've been out in the world in
Mm.
a really interesting place, making things happen. So. But maybe let's start with where you are right now, then, Marley, and what's happening with you.
I am alive
Yes.
and uh, I'm in my lounge. I'm surrounded by things that I love. I have lots of CDs. I have lots of CDs everywhere, books everywhere, and bits and pieces, and my piano behind me.
And just where's the house? I forget which bit of
I'm
Birmingham.
I'm in Moseley. I'm in
In
Moseley.
Moseley. That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
So this is yeah. I don't have a external studio. I've had an external studio like a few times, but for very small periods of time. So right now it's kind of yeah, it's home really,
Yeah.
and anywhere that I kind of plot myself. But from yeah, what you were talking about in terms of the relationships and how things connect, I think it's cool to think about like I think talk about like to begin with, talk about like the organic nature about how this context kind of started.
Yeah.
So in terms of my relationship with Beacon, I had a exhibition maybe 2 years ago now. It feels like it was a really long time ago.
Yeah.
At the Midlands Art Centre, and a lot of that work was from kind of like different perspectives. One from being a social worker and someone that's care experienced and things like this. And from that work, Beacon, I hadn't heard of Beacon before, but Beacon saw that work and then asked to meet me. And then we had a conversation
Mm.
from there. Me, Charlotte, and Peppy, who were there now. So then we knew that we wanted to do something kind of together in that way. And there was lots of kind of connections from just our general kind of histories of working, and especially like within social work and things like this, and just like cool connections with the work. And then I saw the Wheatley Fellowship
Yeah.
advert to work with Eastside, and I was like, this is a really good opportunity to kind of like bring this together. So in essence, I quite like that kind of flow of things.
Mhm.
In terms of work coming from other work, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. It wasn't like just an idea that comes like, okay, let's what's like an interesting context. It's like, okay, this is a context that's emerged from another context, and then kind of passing that forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that exhibition was predominantly like framed photographs and text from different recordings of interviews. Was it in your interviews or was it
Yeah,
own?
like, yeah, different projects. It was one project that was kind of an amalgamation of various other projects, specifically for that exhibition, if that makes sense. So it was a mixture of things. It was yeah, mainly framed photography, and yeah, there was some text, and that text was like a direct excerpt from a conversation between me and my birth mother.
Yeah.
That was from a project that I did with her called Access Subject. Um, yeah. So there's lots of different pieces kind of came together for that exhibition. And yeah.
Yeah, sort of interesting as you when he made the proposal for the fellowship, it had that I don't know, sort of rightness. Like it was already you could feel that some things had connected and made sense, and it was a really, yeah, really lively, like a project bursting with potential. You know, you sort of could feel it straight away. Like you were excited about that. You'd found someone else to connect with, to find
Mhm.
out, and you didn't know what that meant yet. You don't know where that was going to lead, and that's what felt really kind of genuine and
Mhm.
interesting from our perspective. You know that
Yeah,
we
yeah.
wanted to see where this was going to lead and to meet new people and yeah, it's sort of interesting how that like a it's not like a formula, but in a way there is a set of things which just came together, which I think
Mm.
in in an application, if you can express that your excitement about something that needs to be explored to be worked out, it's like
Mm.
so much makes it so much easier.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And anything that kind of bridges kind of the two sides of my kind of life that aren't actually sides, they are kind of they are interconnected in terms of social work and art,
Yeah,
or social care in general is always something
yeah.
that always.
Which is quite it is you know is not that common. Is not. I mean, maybe it's there in people's practices that there's another aspect of their life or another profession that they might have worked with or a period of time that they might have spent somewhere that that can influence the rest of your life in a way. But it
Yeah.
was, but yeah, that also felt. Um, I mean, did you at that point were you imagining a change in your own routines and practice from that point on? Were you looking for a change in terms? Because I think maybe you've talked a bit about how much work you were doing as a social worker, how much time you're spending on making music or artworks, photography. Was there a bit of a rebalancing that you wanted to do at that point?
Not so much of a but I'm not sure. The from when I started this project, the funding that came about for like the beginning of the project, maybe the first half of it, um, that meant I was able to take like a break in working from social work directly from like November last year.
Yeah,
So that kind of changed just like general routine. At that sense, I was kind of full time like doing art practice and kind of doing that basically. So that definitely changed those kinds of routines. But those kinds of like routine changes are always going to be changing in terms of for me anyway, in terms of
yeah,
just like uh kind of like where you want to go or like what you want to do and kind of realities of life and things like this. There's all kinds of like things that come together that means you have to um consistently change that. So it's not just about like what you think, if that makes sense.
yeah,
Not making any
yeah.
sense.
I mean, you mentioned before we started actually that you've also got a music studio
Hmm.
where in the house, and is
Yes.
that and also is like really relevant to how your research has evolved through this project as well. So how does
Mhm.
that is that because you've had a long period of making music and a career as a musician, kind of solo and collaborative as well. So it's kind of useful to know, I don't know, or to reflect on what that means, how that figures into everything else that you do.
Yeah, yeah, I'd say because I'm old and that was the first that was the first music was the first what's the word way of expressing myself.
Mm,
Before like other things came in and then it moved from like being a musician, saying like you're a musician, to then being like an artist, and then moving to saying like multidisciplinary, and then finally like interdisciplinary and all those things. Music is the core of everything. um
right. Yeah.
and it probably always will be because it's
Hmm.
the first thing and it's always there, and it's if you could see around my house, it's the thing I own the most about and things like this. It's interesting because in terms of like where like say I've not put out that much music in the last maybe like 10 years or something like this, like released that much. I've released bits and pieces, but the releasing period of a lot of music was much beforehand. And then kind of other things kind of didn't take over, but were just more like publicly present. So I've like continued to like write music the whole time and things like this, and sound has always been a big core aspect of things. But
Mm.
in terms of on the surface, I say surface, what does surface mean? Instagram and things like this. Like in
Yeah.
terms of like if you go on something and see what does it look like they do the most, then it wouldn't really be like music, but that's always there. And as a, and I'm really interested in that being, or sound anyway, being like a quite prominent in this project.
Mm. Yeah.
Um,
But have you
at the
in
core.
previous exhibitions
Mm.
you haven't used sound, have you?
There was a little bit of sound in the one at the Mac, just like
Oh,
one
right.
sound piece. And I did something at Eagleworks in Wolverhampton last year, that was a sound
Cool.
piece as well. So it's
Yeah.
kind of starting to flicker back in terms of like publicly. Um, but now I just kind of see everything as, everything's just under the umbrella of art. So it's just kind of like you just kind of that's how
Absolutely.
I see it as a part of the whole now in
Yeah.
terms of that.
Yeah.
So
Cool.
yeah,
So
yeah.
what happens then at the start then with Beacon? I remember when we went to visit,
Mhm.
and then you kind of set up a series of meets, didn't you? And started really getting much more of a spending
Yeah.
time with the team there at Beacon.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I set up got like a little room in the building, and I set like a miniature version of my studio up, just like my laptop and a little audio interface and a nice microphone, and kind of met with at first I kind of described them as interviews, but I wouldn't now I when I think of them, reflecting on them, they were just like recorded conversations
Yeah.
um in a way that because of yeah, there weren't interviews per se. They were just like recorded
Yeah.
conversations. And I think a lot of that kind of distinction in my brain is because of kind of like my background or like perspective on things. So like the things that we're kind of exploring and talking about, there's like an affinity based between me and whoever I was talking to anyway, just because we're both involved in social care at like
Yes.
a
Yeah. Yeah.
professional way in general. So it
Mm.
wasn't like learning about, it was kind of like more of a conversation. But at the same
Yeah.
time, there is a learning about, because one of the main things that I kind of know from like working in teams in social care is that like everybody is such a human thing. So everybody is bringing like a whole history behind them. Um,
Yeah.
and a whole
Well,
history and a context to an actual human being within this context. So
yeah.
as from like an outside perspective, it is the title of a person. So a social worker or a therapist, and then whatever kind of thoughts you have about that word and what that word gives to you is what
Mm.
that person like is in totality. But that's like not really the case. Like it's a human being, and there's all kinds of reasons why people come to the work that they do, and what the challenges are, and how they feel presently, and what the like yeah, what brought them there, what the future challenges are, like how they feel in general. Those
Mm.
kinds of questions and those were the kinds of like conversations we would have, and kind of conversations about like just like wider political and cultural like issues and not even
Yeah.
issues, I don't know the word issues, but just like thoughts about right now, basically. Yeah. So we kind of went through most of the staff there, like the core members of the team. It's a very small team.
Mhm.
People who work for Beacon, if I say something that is
Yeah, I've just seen
not right,
Charlotte's there as well.
please just like say. Um, and also like I don't know, it was just really cool because I think, me being a social worker probably helped with this as well. Like um, it. yeah, it wasn't like somebody like going into some. I was going into it, but I
Hmm.
was kind of like welcomed and embraced like really nicely.
Yeah,
So
because I
and
guess that they had to
as
get to
part
know.
of, yeah, deemed as part of Beacon in this time. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
they had to get to know you as much as you wanted to listen to what's happening. And
Yeah.
I mean, so I'm interested in that landscape that you're describing. Like actually, because you both have views and experience of what's happening in the political landscape that ultimately is affecting this area. Maybe it's just to say a little bit about what Beacon does and the Theraplay element, which I think is really fascinating, a really interesting approach, but also that kind of like is it a great time for for this sort of organization? Is it like a very buoyant, supportive landscape that's out there at the moment? Maybe is a disingenuous question.
No, well, like I don't know, yeah, you know, Beacon as a whole, they do lots of things. The main core of what they do is therapeutic work with children and families to help build and rebuild relationships. A lot of work with adoptive and kinship families and
Mhm.
resettling families as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I'm got clapping. There's like those flies that go on plants.
Yeah, which as you
Yeah,
just say
cool.
that, very simply, that sounds like such an essential thing. If there is a breakdown in families and in the ability to be able to bring families together, hold them together, support
Mhm.
them, and if that's breaking down, then that's such an important
Yeah.
function, isn't it, and role. So
And do you want to add anything? Anyone that works in Beacon who's in the room?
You're doing grand, Marley. Just reassuring you. We, yeah, we loved having you, and yeah. I mean, you've summed it up there, and I think some of what you said about kind of the connection and how you felt part of the team certainly for Peppy and I, when we first saw your exhibition at the Mac, we found it very moving. And I found it particularly moving because you expressed something about social work in a way that I hadn't been able to say myself. So like I felt a connection. And I think, that's one of the things about running an organization that's doing something so critical, as you say, as holding families together. But how do you keep saying that in ways that people get how important it is? And
yeah,
that's where the interest was.
Mhm.
yeah, absolutely. Kind of in a way, it's like people would only notice when it's all fallen apart and it's not there anymore, which is too late. It's like it can't
Yes.
be at that moment. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Charlotte. That's great. So I mean, maybe back to you, Marley. What have, can you sort of talk us through that process a little bit then? Because then you're in this place and you have made the connections and
Mhm.
what did you find happen? Because we started with this idea of listening to the noises and watching the doings and,
Yeah.
being incidental, not intending to do anything yet in particular, like waiting. So
So I think listening to the noises, I think it kind of in my mind it started kind of before it started a little bit in terms of the kind of first conversation that we had in the cafe with Eastside and Beacon were there.
yeah,
Yeah, Charlotte Peppy and yeah, Eastside and me. And I think it just there was there's just little bits that came up in like conversation then. I think something that is kind of like the working title of what I'm doing. So
yeah.
it may stay or it may disappear. I've been told you pronounce it compensare.
Compensare.
Carmen said when I was like, it's compensar in my, in my I was like, no, 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 no. It's
Sounds more brummy
compensar.
like that. Or
But
sounds Italian otherwise.
but I think it kind of is as well. Like it's an interesting word, anyways. The etymology it's in the etymology of compensate, and it was through a conversation. We're talking about how um like services such as Beacon can sometimes feel like uh they are like compensating for statutory services or compensating for things that should um kind of be able to kind of exist within councils, but because of like lack of funding and resource cuts and things like this, they're unable to. So it kind of ends up being, and I know, like, you know, Charlotte specifically did used to work for a council and then left the council and then developed this. So I was really interested in that feeling of, yeah, so the epistemology of compensate is compensare, and that's to kind of, I'm going to read it from here. Like, it's to counterbalance and to make up for something and to weigh against each other. So like these kinds of ideas are the kind of the main driving forces. From speaking with the staff and then moving on to some of the main stuff that I've kind of been doing recently is, so we put together like a consent form because I wanted to watch all of the Theraplay sessions, all of those sessions, therapeutic play sessions that they have with children and families. They're all like filmed. So wonderfully had permission from 3 families, I think, for me to have access to those videos and to watch some of those videos, which is like you know, super, super grateful for. And it's a very kind of intimate thing to be watching, and something that you have to hold with a lot of like responsibility and things
Yeah.
like this. And as part of that process is, you know, to say to those families, like, any kind of like artworks and things that get made from this, it's more just to get like an essence of what is happening, you know what I mean? But like it's not like a documentary in a way of which like somebody might walk in and be like, oh, that's just us, or anything like that. And
Yeah.
I think that was just like an interesting kind of like limitation to like jump from, knowing that these things have to be like translated in some way, you know what I mean? Like, you know, watching these therapeutic sessions and watching them over like many weeks that they were happening. And I would just like sit and like write different notes down, things around just the general feelings from them, and also just like visual cues and like certain movements and certain thoughts and things like this. And then bring kind of using those to then add to my vocabulary to then move to like another stage of making, mixed
Yeah.
with the conversations I've been having with the staff members as well. So kind of getting to the core, trying to get to a core through conversations with staff members about, like I said earlier, like their histories that lead them up to the work they do, how they feel about the work that they do in the future and things like that. And then having access to kind of like directly viewing the work that's been recorded and it's already happened, like in private. And also kind of attended one group session, which was in real life, group therapeutic play session. And also it was quite interesting was, so the more like institutional parts of things, so some of the training, just like staff training and things like that, and getting to kind of like learn about some of the kind of considerations that have to be made about working in like a small organization, and kind of like what that means to work in a small organization. So yeah, lots of just trying to hit it from like different kind of angles before then moving
Yeah.
to another stage of kind of thinking and making, where I worked with
It's kind of it's interesting just to hear you reflect on that. And I suppose that we had thought, you know, this is pretty serious and very generous involvement and you know, subject and sort of intimacy or privacy of people's lives. But in a way, I suppose we felt that you kind of, you're already in that arena, so you can handle that, because in a way that's quite an intense thing for an artist to be involved in. You know, there's quite a commitment and a responsibility to be entering into that. So it's kind of but in a way for you, it's more a part of your life. It's perhaps, or did it feel like you were treading into new territory with this because of your position within it as an artist?
Yeah, it's probably a mixture of both. I think, you know, I've been a I don't know, I've worked with people in different variants of my whole life, really. So like, the social work side of things is like 10, coming up to 10 years. But before that, there's, my whole life has worked in residential support in different contexts and mentoring and different things like that. So that's always been there. I think it means there's when I'm watching things like that or being involved with things like that, my background and all that kind of things means I can hold those things emotionally,
Yeah.
but it's still emotional, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And then I think in essence, it kind of there needs to be, there always needs to be that element. It's definitely not something, say even if it was just like in social work specifically, like when I'm going back to work directly in social work in a couple of weeks' time, if I go back and I'm like cold, then that would be the end of social work. That would be done.
Mm.
Like, no, that's the end of that then. Like you can't, you always need to have that layer of
Mm.
kind of vulnerability there. It has to be present. And if that goes away, then something is wrong and something has to kind of change because,
Yeah.
you're bringing your human self to it. And we're all just like humans doing
Mm.
these kind of having kind of as I had the break from social work and be able to like reflect on things, kind of having these uh well, technically everything is strange in life. How humans like devise themselves around and do stuff. But so when you're working in these types of things, it's just like, okay, I know through the types of teams I've been in and the types of assessments I've done with like in fostering and kinship, connected persons fostering, and just kind of where you sit in other people's lives
Hmm.
terms of like decisions that have been
Yeah.
made about like where children ultimately like reside and live the rest of their lives and things like this. It's like a very like strange thing if you just like think about like a human's place in like somebody's life.
Mm.
So it's just like, yeah, something that constantly kind of think about. And
Yeah.
philosophically, I don't know if that's the right word, but it kind of made me reflect on even just like what this project is and kind of what any project would be.
Hmm.
But like the thing that makes me the thing that makes me kind of be okay about the positions that you've held in people's lives at like a quite important level is always just like, okay, so say if I'm doing a fostering assessment and, whether you say X or Y really has a major impact on kind of where a child eventually lives or whether they stay within their family network and things like this.
Yeah. Yeah.
To me, the only way that I can kind of reflect on those things and kind of be okay about them is the sense of you had between this time and this time to do something, and you did what you could have done with the information you had between this time and that time. And that's like all it is, and you're making like considerations about the future and things like this. And then in a project of this nature, it's like thinking like this is you started on this month, you finished on this month, and then this was the result of this time.
Yeah.
Kind of like that is it. So it's like you,
Well, it's in
that,
some
that
ways,
that's it, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? It's like
yeah, it
that's
is that,
what
but
that is. It doesn't
because
need to be
you're,
anything bigger or smaller.
yeah, but because you're involved in, I mean, in some ways, that's an aspiration for a lot of art making, and particularly for artist placement group, the kind of history that we've referring to with incidental artists. It sort
Mm,
of is it's like to deal to approach the criticism that art is removed from life, and so
mm,
what you try and do is make art part of life and connect it into people's lives
yeah.
directly, like be there, see what happens. But it's yeah, it suddenly becomes quite there's quite a weight to it, isn't there? There's quite a even
Yeah.
though, as you say, it is just what happens between there and there, it's
Mm,
still within that. It's significant. I mean, it's really exciting just to hear it
mm.
sort of retold in a way to kind of think about that as a step because, yeah, how do you keep yourself fluid and moving and open and ready, and not blocked by that responsibility or weight of it in some way? How do you deal with that?
Well, it's mainly through thinking of it like that, really. That's what kind of calms me down. I have to think, oh, it is just this to this equals this, and then you kind of move forward because
Yeah.
otherwise the weight of those things could be too much. So in the sense of like, I have my experience and these types of things, but I'm not the voice for that specific unique that experience. Like, and
Yeah.
say, there might be a lot of themes within the work that, there's gonna be, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but I don't know.
Maybe get to, if
Yeah.
we, sort of now feel like it's that little jump of from being part of the environment through
Mm,
that period of time, then you kind of made this step suddenly, that idea of compensare and the compensating, the balancing became an approach for you to think about sound and how to begin constructing a score, how to,
mm.
and then and other people being part of it. I mean, what was that little creative leap that happened there?
Yeah, well, I knew I wanted to work I want, in terms of that whole thing of like that translation element of like, how do you, not how do you, because it's always like kind of the case, but just moving away from just mirroring something, or like I don't like the word capture, so I'll use it here because I don't like the word capture too much. Although I wrote it in an application the other day, and I just kind of wish I could think of another word, but I couldn't. But like where you just get something and then like you present it. It's like, actually, where's the translation? Where is the yeah, where is that process that you go through? You go through like an
Mm,
artful process, which then
yeah.
ultimately will often mean that something is in a different form on the other side. And a way of kind of like ensuring that or extending that is like working with people who haven't seen these videos or haven't been at it from that side, and then I kind of like translate it to them and devise different ways of working. So I'm working some of the visual elements at the moment. I'm working with a dance artist called Kim Borman, and a actor and writer called Marley as well. They're called Marley. And we we did like, we've got and had planned in 3 sessions, but we've done 2, and we've got one coming up in a couple of weeks, the last one, to do some final filming. And in those sessions, we, well, Kim started them off kind of like grounding us in play, really. Like, I almost want to get Kim to explain what Kim did, but because I'm not very good at saying that. But it was great. Kim, do you want to quickly say what you did to start the sessions? If Kim is still here,
Yeah,
Kim.
Yeah,
sure.
I can
I'm
see
still
Kim.
here. I
Yes.
just had to find the button to unmute me. Yeah, I mean, it's true. I have a very playful process to exactly actually give this space, Gavin, that you kind of ask for. How do you make space?
Mm,
And because I'm not, I'm not really, well, I'm a fully into my motion. And I always just take a lot of time to tune in. And so the best way for me to do it is just to move the body
mm,
because this is my instrument, and I see it in other people too. I think it is our instrument. And it's really useful to just um, get the sense of feeling and the trust and this kind of dropping into playfulness. So basically, what I do is I almost overload information. I'm saying it's via movement, but I talk a lot while I do it, because there I feel actually most comfortable talking because it's together. It's together with outlining where we are. We have time to look at the context and to really arrive. And arriving is not just 1 minute thing, but it really takes time throughout the whole little session. And I work with objects because it just makes us more real instantly. Holding a cup gives instantly like a confidence for the body, and objects are so immediate that I find them very admiring in my work. because they just are. They're not like swirling around to try to get to the point, but they just are. And I think that's something that I aspire for our body, our instrument to settle into. So, and then I stimulate with the elemental qualities and imageries, ideas, being very playful, quite free and light. And it kind of just gets us really warmed up to one another. Yeah, that's basically what I've been sharing.
Yes, thank you. So yeah, Kim is wonderful. And Kim started the sessions, and then we kind of moved. I think what's the word? Like choreographic devices, I think is like the word. Was that the would you say that's the word, Kim, to use in terms of what I was doing? Kind of like I was pulling the videos and the observations that I've made in the game specifically, and asking Kim and Marley to actually play those games in movement. And then I would interrupt those movements with some other types of thoughts that were like kind of like broader observations of the things that I noticed from the work from what I'd observed at Beacon without going into too much detail of exactly kind
But
of
the games came from watching the Theraplay sessions.
yeah.
Games that are
There's
used in
lots
the
and lots of
therapy.
specific like games that kind of all have um it's interesting because like you'll see a game and then it's always understanding there's actually like quite a lot to every game. Like there's lots of theory and reasons why everything is happening. Whilst it's all still very playful, but there's you know it is still therapy in that way. So
Mm.
we did a lot of using those to as like choreographic devices, and then thinking about like we all come to these things as people and histories. Like in the final session that we'll do, because we've had a bit of a gap between the second and the third session. It'll be honing down like exactly the types of movements, but we'll be also be working with Pepe, who has a history. So Pepe is a senior therapist at Beacon now and is one of the staff there. But Pepe also has a history in movement as well. So Pepe will be at that session. So
Yeah,
there'll be lots of
fantastic.
all kinds of things happening. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
yeah, and then
And the
going
other
from
thing
there,
just to
it's
mention,
hard being we're in the kind of the middle of the process of the
yeah,
thing. So it's
and but it's very worth mentioning that shift because instead of doing this work that you've just been talking about and Kim was mentioning in Beacon spaces, you actually decided to do that here in Eastside Project. So Eastside
yeah,
Projects became the studio space for
yeah,
rehearsing, testing out, and
yeah. And we used it's all this I've got like this map in front of me of all because when whenever I've come for these meetings, my thoughts are just really scattered everywhere. So I'm kind of like try to like map it out on a piece of paper and to be one of the other kind of like translation things. And another thing that kind of grounded us was a really good book called Respect for Acting by, is it Uta? Oh my God.
respect for acting.
Uta Hagen, which is like, it's a really, really great book called Respect for Acting. And yeah, Uta Hagen kind of talks through her kind of like acting method, definitely like acting as art. So I
Mm,
kind of like went through this book and kind of like noted every element of it that I thought was interesting and like wrote it down. And then like
yeah.
had a second layer where I did it again and then like typed it and then had a third layer where me after Kim did the introductions, me, Kim and Marley like read through and then what are we all feeling in this as well. So
Mm,
yeah, lots of bits and pieces. A lot of the stuff he was doing, Kim, was about like the micro and macro, and I was using like the Taoist system to explore that, and that was like directly connected to the general ideas I have. It is a lot to do with the specific intimacies of what's happening as being like the micro, and then the macro being the more the like the more of like the political elements or like the cultural context or yeah, political context. Thinking about some of the stuff which is just like in my the word is stuck in my head is egregious, maybe this will either be called compensara or egregious, one of the two. 'Cause egregious is a bit strong for a title, but it's in there just because of the egregious nature of
Yeah.
how I feel about like the context of particular kind of like funding cuts and the impacts those of having specifically on like specialist support with families in terms of the adoption adoption support fund, adoption and special guardianship support fund, which is a fund that is how families are able to access a service like Beacon most of the time. Like,
Yeah.
but that's being cut by quite a lot.
Is that a way then to kind of build into the artwork that you're making this kind of emotion, because it is a very emotive subject, isn't it? The idea of cutting funds that support people's lives is like it's
Yeah.
instantly emotive, and it's quite. I mean, in a way, it's quite weird as a political choices that when they know how that affects people's lives, it kind of builds in this tension in some way.
Yeah, completely.
But have
That
you have worked out how to do that yet? How to build that in or make that evident when people are in experiencing whatever the artwork turns into in the end, they're going to know the sort of emotive structures that are in the background.
yeah, they will be there. They may be obvious and they may not be that obvious at the same time. I don't know yet.
Yeah.
Um, but there will be an element of a missing that's in there. You know, in some of the sound things that I've been doing, I've been programming things that are just 60% of what they should be, just referencing a 40% off and things like this.
Hmm.
I'm starting to do
Yeah.
that with sound and may do that with visual things too. So it's just finding ways of getting those things there and kind of showing that, you know, cuts and things like this and cuts of resources from all angles, from like the beginning and at the end of a child's kind of like journey, you know.
Yeah.
So there's
Hmm.
elements of that like I definitely want to have in there in some way.
Yeah.
There's lots. It's one of those things. There's actually so much that it can't all be in there. But
Yeah, I know. Yeah, yeah.
that's why it's like
Yeah.
from this time to this time, and this was what this was in this period of time. Yeah, there's yeah, yeah.
I got one more question before I'll open it out to anyone else. So if you want questions, you can type them in the chat, or we can wait in a minute and put hands up, and you can come on and ask the questions. But I was thinking about that as you started describing the Theraplay and the activities that are there. It's quite interesting that within like it's for a reason. Like there's a function to the process that there, but in a way, it's a using the ideas of games and the interactions, the performing activity of it is like using elements of artworks, elements of exhibiting, displaying, performing for
Mm,
a reason to to have an impact, to bring people together, to make people realize what's going on in their lives and their interactions. It's kind of an interesting one when it's already there's a kind of
yeah.
art seed in there, and then you're kind of coming back out. Are you interested in that fun like for the reason, for a function, for a purpose, or is it sometimes almost making sure it's not too functional in what like your responses? Is there a bit of a tension in that, or something you're
No,
still working
I
on?
think
Or
it's probably something I'm still working on. I definitely not everything in my head now anyway, because who knows? This is literally mid-process. There isn't an actual object that has been made yet for this. Just so this is all just like thoughts. But there's these things that I want to say, but it's also keeping that playful element and also knowing that things are going to come out of the making that are going to be different to what I'm thinking now, if that makes sense. So,
yeah.
you know, not there might be elements where it's like this just feels good and that's what that is.
Hmm.
And then
Yeah.
in 2 years' time, you look back at it, like, oh, that's didn't just feel good. That was because you
Yeah.
heard this, and this, and these things made these connections. So it's kind of keeping that element of play, because play is a huge element of what's happening anyway. So it's, it's also, it's still, and I want, there's hope maybe there may not be like an element of humor and things like this in there, because I'm watching therapy in essence, but because of the type of therapy it is, people are laughing and having fun.
Yeah.
Like that's the kind of the point. Like that is what's actually like building those that part of that is rebuilding those relationships as well. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. We've got some other questions here. There's a question from Sonia asking, were the three families that you were privileged enough to be able to watch the therapy sessions, have they been involved or able to have a say in the artworks created or being created?
I've not spoken to them yet, but the plan is to speak to them. At a very, very baseline, I definitely want to speak to them and say thank you for allowing me to see
Yeah.
their therapy as well. In terms of the artworks being made, they haven't been made yet. But one of the going back to what I said before, like one of the major things is they won't be able to recognize specifically themselves in an artwork, if that makes sense. That's really important.
Yes.
So everything is being translated. It's more about like the essence of what I was watching. But that if there's anything that is a bit more like specific, it would definitely be something that I kind of speak to them about as well. Yeah, that's
Great.
always hugely
Yeah.
on top of my.
Which is picked up a bit in the next question from Madeline, which is saying just wondering how to deal with the privacy of the people that you're working with, which I think you've just touched on. How do you explain to them what you are doing and where it's going to go? Which I think was maybe a conversation from Beacon direct with them.
Yeah, and we put together, took a little bit of time to like get the consent form right, didn't we, Charlotte? And then each the like the so Charlotte's one was one of Charlotte's families and another person called Nikki in the team, and they spoke directly to those families and had those conversations with them and helped I don't know what the word is, but kind of just
Quite
explain.
dynamic, wasn't it, Marley? That it was quite dynamic, wasn't it? In that
Yeah.
we started with something because you clearly have to, but when we spoke to families, there was a conversation then back with Marley about this is what they're saying, is that okay? Before we actually got
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
consent.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Yeah, but that was really important to have that space and time to make sure that that was got right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. And then, so there's ask a question saying, would we hear an example of Theraplay? Or also saying, is there a book you can recommend on that? But I'm not sure if there is. If you've got a book, Charlotte?
We haven't got a book, but we've got some YouTube clips of us doing Theraplay with families who consented to be videoed, not in therapy, I'd say. Were acting sessions. So I will stick one in the chat now for people to have a look at.
Thanks. That's good. Peppy's just popped in. A book can be helpful to peek into as well for Theraplay. I've got one more question from here.
Kelly's got a hand up.
Yeah, then I'm going to go to Kelly. So let me see what this is. Oh, no, sorry, there's not a question in that one. Right, over to Kelly.
Hello. Marley, thank you so much. That was so fascinating. My sister is a social worker and she works in adoption in Birmingham, and I think she's done a bit of work with Beacon. So really fascinating to kind of hear what you're doing. And I really enjoyed the way that you talked about it's a period of time and your time and the people that you're working with time and Beacon's time kind of coincides for this period, and it's kind of what can be done in that time. And I suppose I was thinking about like so there's that, and then I really liked what you were saying about capturing and it being more than capturing, about translating or positioning, and why you're doing this as art and not as social work. And it made me think about what happens after that period of time. If this period of time is sort of impactful, sort of transformative in some way for you, obviously, but also for all the participants involved. They come and see the work, they've had conversations with you, blah, blah, all of that kind of stuff. And maybe offers a different kind of agency, perhaps. I don't know. I'm just sort of thinking around it all. I guess what happens afterwards when you're no longer there and there's been a sort of transformational moment, or a sense of agency or provocation in a way, how then are the people that you've been working with kind of supported in that moment? And I feel like I've made that sound really bad, and I don't mean that, because I think quite often these moments are, they do lead to something else. But it's always interesting that way. How does the artist say goodbye in a way and leave a moment? And I just wondered whether that's something you'd been thinking about and building into the process of making, I suppose.
Yeah.
A long question.
No. I think in conversations I've been having with Eastside, so there's no plans of anything yet, but we've been thinking about the public, what's the official term? Public programming? Is that the official term? Like the programming and things around, especially when the show is on, and thinking about like how we kind of invite different relevant organizations and like groups of people to kind of like come together and like do something in the space that would be interesting, of whether we don't know. It's not just to like come and see the show, but like do something else. Like say if it was like all of the, you've got Birmingham Adoption, then you've got Adoption at Heart and the regional adoption agencies around the Midlands and things like this. If like there's some kind of event where we come together and we have it within Eastside, kind of maybe part of those types of events can talk about like how this kind of like bridges on. But other than this, I don't know just yet. Is the overarching answer? But there's like, I'm like in my brain is like in this like little making mode, and Eastside are wonderfully always grabbing my head out of that sand and being like these broader things and blah 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 blah. And like, oh yeah, it's good to think about that, blah 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 blah. And it's like good. So, left down to me, I'd shovel down, but it's not just down to me. It's Eastside too, which is good. So
And that's why you work with an organization, isn't it, in a way, a curatorial organization that can kind of support that, what those next steps are. And that sounds, I really want to come to some of that programming. I'm sure my sister would as well. Can I ask one more question? Is that okay?
Go for it. Good.
Sorry, Marley. This has been really exciting to hear.
As long as it's a short one.
It will be a short one. It will be a short one. I think the fact that you have sort of previous experience, so you come with lived understanding of the context that you're working with, I think it's clear how that's given you an insight into how to engage. But I wondered whether that's made any barriers, like too much, and I don't know whether maybe that's not even a question you can answer, because you can only go into these situations as you are, who you are, with the knowledge that you have. But I just wondered whether, what have been the sticking points, I suppose, from having that knowledge?
I guess if any, like a potential sticking point, which I don't think has happened, but what could have happened is if you think you know too, because if you think you know too much, then you kind of like lose a curiosity, if that makes sense. But in terms of what B can do, that is still kind of outside of my experience specifically. You know what I mean? Like, so I've worked through like various different teams within social work, from like child protection to different types of fostering teams to adoption towards the end. But I'm not a therapist very specifically, and that's not my training. So I think that kind of distance does mean that I still have that curiosity to kind of ensure that I don't think I know too much. But that curiosity does not say that curiosity is perfect. There may have been some times in those conversations that I was having, and I'm like, it's a positive that feel like that we are like colleagues, because in the broader sense of colleague in terms of working in social care, if I listen back to some of those recordings, there may have been points where I spoke over somebody thinking in a bit of like, oh yeah, I know, but actually they were probably going to go somewhere else, and I missed it because of that. So that could be there too, and that's just part of the humanness of it, I guess. You know what I mean? So it's just trying not to. I think a big part of it is maybe that's connected to not trying to not make it as weighty as it could be, and not to be like you're some kind of like superhero and you're going to change the world with your big exhibition or something like this. Is like, no, you got to try and do something interesting from what you know in the time that you have, and then that's kind of what it is, with all of the inconsistencies and the messinesses with it. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Great.
It does. Thank you. Yeah, really good to hear you talk. Thank you.
Thanks, Marley. Thanks, Kelly. And also, I think it's worth saying that I think we're planning to be continuing talking about what comes out of the process and the relationship with Beacon. In a way, it's like Beacon have already put things out about working with Marley, which are kind of interesting in how it's phrased. It's like, working with our artist in residence. It's like, in a way, we don't have an endpoint. We have a, a, a place where a public outcome or activity or something will happen, but it's not necessarily an endpoint. I think when we've been talking about it, we were interested in perhaps there's another step, perhaps there's a next thing to do, whether that's connected with Beacon, connecting with Marley, connecting with something else. It's kind of, in a way, we want all of these processes with the incidental artists to be open-ended and identify another way for us to make a next step happen. So I think that's definitely something that we'll all be looking for and talking with each other about. Yeah. Great. We have run out of time. Thanks for all the brilliant questions. I'm sure that there's plenty more, but I think we'll cut it there because it's been a brilliant conversation. Thank you so much, Marley, for delving in. Yeah, it's been really great spending the time, and thanks everyone for being so involved and engaged. And that's the name of the game for the next stage of the process, to see where we can get to. Marley's exhibition, which we think is going to be an exhibition, we think is going to be the end of January, what we're looking at. So we're actually sort of running into it, and as these processes are happening, there's recordings and performances and all sorts of things. So we're looking to, in theory, we're launching Friday, 23rd of January. So you're all very welcome to come along to that opening on the evening, 6 to 8 p.m. So that's our plan at the moment. I think it's likely we'll stick to that. We'll see. So it'd be lovely to see you here for that. If you're around before that, we have the Digbeth First Friday opening on October the 3rd with Verity Jane Keith's exhibition and Harmon's exhibition opening. And then on the 7th of November, for the November Digbeth First Friday, we're launching the new Digbeth Cultural Action Plan, here and Grand Union and everywhere in Digbeth as well. We'll be publishing the plan, and we'll have a billboard campaign around, and hopefully lots of activity happening around how to keep and nurture the cultural actions that we're all very, very fond of here in Digbeth and that need a lot of support. So come along to one of those. And otherwise, we'll see you at the next online event, which I haven't got in front of me, but it's on the website. You can find it there. So thanks, everyone, and see you all soon. Cheers.